Worsening relations between Russia and the US and its allies have spilled over into the Arctic, the once serene habitat of polar bears, aquatic organisms, and other precious forms of life. So what happened? Has the region become the latest venue for geopolitical tensions? Well, let's talk about today's Arctic. Welcome to Factstyle. I'm Saina. The Arctic is the Earth's northmost region. From an air power perspective, the shortest path to North America for Russian missiles and bombers is over the North Pole. From a naval perspective, as Arctic ice melts, sea routes will likely remain navigable for longer periods. Recently, the formerly peaceful Wonderland has been growing in geostrategic importance. But before we access the Arctic's strategic location, let's look at first at its unique geographic conditions. Unlike the Antarctic, which is a continent surrounded by oceans, the Arctic is an ocean surrounded by continents. So what does it mean? Theoretically, the opposing polar regions may seem to be obviously twins, but in reality, they are not. Antarctica is not owned by any one nation and is governed internationally. But the Arctic region covers parts as many as 8 countries: Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and let's not forget the US. And these Arctic nations are recognized as stewards of the region via an intergovernmental forum called the Arctic Council. Why is this relevant to our topic today? Because 7 of these 8 Arctic nations will be NATO members if Finland and Sweden join the alliance. Russia will be the only one left out in the cold, so to speak. So here is what happened recently. In August, Jens Stoltenberg became the first NATO Secretary General in history to visit Canadian Arctic, while stressing the need to beef up security along the alliance's northern flank to counter Russia. He accused Russia of reopening hundreds of Soviet-era military sites in the region, saying its capabilities there pose a strategic challenge to the 30-nation alliance.
An important, as a NATO ally, I've always known that, but when I realized the importance you play in the high north, in the Arctic. And the Arctic is important for NATO. When Finland and Sweden joins NATO, hopefully very soon, 7 out of 8 Arctic nations will be NATO members. And that would just increase the importance of the Arctic for the alliance.
In the same week, the US State Department announced that President Biden planned to mirror all the other Arctic nations and appoint America's first ambassador at large for the Arctic region. This plan came at the heels of another US effort to increase its regional influence. The Department of Defense opened its first regional center in the Arctic on August 11th. The center was set to represent the department's commitment to building strong networks of international security leaders who work with aligned partners and nations. What about Russia? Well, heightened by worsening relations with the West, its fear of encirclement by NATO and its allies in the Arctic feels more real than ever.
For Russia, this is the Arctic today seems much more important than ever during the Soviet period or the Cold War.
And the Russians know that Arctic is a maritime zone of strategic importance to their country. Let's take a listen.
If we look at the Arctic as a geographic region on the globe, we will see that Russia takes over most of this region. We're not talking about political borders, we're talking about geographic borders, interests, development history, exploration of the region. You can put an equal sign between Russia and the Arctic.
That's why on Russian Navy Day this year in July, President Vladimir Putin signed the country's new naval doctrine. According to Malte Hemford, senior fellow and founder of the Arctic Institute, the new 55-page doctrine places significant emphasis on Russian priorities in the Arctic by mentioning it across no fewer than 22 pages. Compared with the most recent 2015 edition, this year's edition downgrades the Atlantic region to 3rd place in the list of operational priorities and elevates the Arctic to 1st. Hamper highlights the Arctic's transformation into a region of global competition, not only from an economic but also from a military point of view. The doctrine identifies US and NATO maritime activities in the Arctic as a major threat to Russia. It states that these efforts to weaken Russia's control over the Northern Sea route and the foreign naval buildup in the Arctic are a central threat to its security. But why are these countries suddenly placing such value on the Arctic? What's all the fuss about? Well, there are many important reasons, one of which is what Hamper mentioned in his analyses, the Northern Sea route, also known as the NSR. If you look at the maritime traffic in the Arctic, there are two main routes, the Northwest Passage and the Northern Sea route. The NSR mainly traverses Russian waters. It's gaining special prominence because of global warming. According to Nikkei, the NSR is the shortest route between East Asia and Europe, and it will be the first to be ice-free due to climate conditions. So, in other words, it has this huge potential to blow up the world's existing logistics networks. Of course, the NSR still has a lot of problems right now, such as its seasonality, the high cost of ice-breaking capabilities, its very specific requirements regarding containers like their draft and ice class, and its insufficient instructor and intermediary ports. So there are a lot of issues to worry about if you want to sail the NSR. But many of these will take care of themselves as the polar ice gradually melts. Meanwhile, the NSR has many significant advantages, making it somewhat comparable to the Suez Canal. First of all, it's much shorter. For example, the journey from Rotterdam to Yokohama via Suez Canal is over 20,000 kilometers, yet the NSR is about 40% shorter, 12,000 kilometers. That slashes up to 7 days of the trip, and there's more. Due to the shorter distance between some regions, bunker oil consumption will be reduced, cutting off CO2 emissions. The route is also easier to navigate as it bypasses the pirate-infested waters. So sailing the NSR means you don't have to worry about getting hijacked. Also, developing the NSR will probably spare the world another ever-given incident in the Suez Canal. Remember the ultra-large container ship that got stuck last year, temporarily blocking 400 ships from sailing through the Vital Passage, holding up nearly $60 billion worth of global trade. I'm sure that no one wants that type of week-long standstill to happen again. On the whole, it looks like the race is among the Arctic nations. The 2022 Global Peace Index, published by the Institute for Economics and Peace, measures the state of peace in different countries using a basket of up to 23 indicators, including military spending, access to weaponry, and troop headcount. The index, however, shows that overall peacefulness has deteriorated in 6 of the 8 Arctic states. Iceland and Norway are the only ones to have remained their positions. Canada fell by 4 places, dropping out of the world's 10 most peaceful countries for the first time. And it comes as no surprise that Russia experienced the 4th largest decrease in peacefulness, falling by 5 places to rank as the world's 4th least peaceful country. So here we go. These are the 8 countries that we need to count on to make decisions on the Arctic on our behalf. Although the decisions carry global climate and economic significance, they don't seem welcoming to outsiders. Back in 2019, Reuters anonymously quoted a senior US official who said the 8 Arctic states conduct governance of the Arctic region, and we reject attempts by non-Arctic states to claim a role in this process. However, seeking an exclusive clique runs counter to the interests of the global community, especially given that what happened in the Arctic could affect the lives of basically everyone on the planet. Yet this year, not only were non-Arctic states not welcomed, but so too was a member of the Arctic Council itself. The activities of the 8-member Arctic Council came to a halt this year, as a majority of its member states refused to participate in meetings scheduled to be held by Russia. But the Arctic won't wait. It carries a genuine regional risk to which we're all vulnerable.
Climate change is the most important security risk in the Arctic. So the work of the Arctic Council is super important in that sense when it comes to the mitigation of adaptation to climate change. And military alliances don't focus on climate change.
So let's do something before it's too late. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you like our show, please click like and subscribe. Also, leave your comments down below. We'd like to hear how you guys think. I'm Saina. I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.